Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon in Israel. Welcome to our second series on Israel Heroes events, our third community Zoom program. Want to welcome you all, and if we have our national chairman, Steve Friedman. Scott, is he connected?
It looks like he's connecting to, yeah, I think he just connected to audio. He's muted though.
Okay.
My apologies. I don't know what's with the firm system, but enough said. As long as I can hear, everything's fine. I can see everybody else. And the fact that you can't see me may be a benefit. How's that?
So, Steve, it's such an honor to have you as our national chairman, and just want you to say a few words of welcome, and then we'll get started.
Well, listen, first of all, this is a distinguished group, and me excluded, a good-looking group, which is why I'm glad the picture doesn't work. It's great to have the ambassador on with us, and you know, we're trying to get a lot of projects going to support Kaplan in Israel, and I think it's a fabulous enterprise that really thrives on Lou Boucher's energy and refusal to say no, and that's in the true tradition of the Israeli spirit. And with that, Lou, fire. Okay. Fire when ready, Gridley.
Okay, Steve, thank you so much. Your leadership in Philadelphia and throughout the country for all the things you do for Israel is greatly, greatly appreciated. So,
well, today it's quite anonymous, and maybe that's good. Thank you.
So for those who don't know, my name's Lou Boucher. I'm National Director of American Friends of Kaplan Medical Center, and it is such a pleasure to be with you all today. Something which, thinking about this time of coronavirus, COVID-19, it's unique in that there's so much distance, but yet there's still so much intimacy. This allows us to build community together and make stronger connections to Israel. And that's what the purpose of these Zoom conferences are, to build community and create stronger connections to Israel. It's so fitting to have Ambassador Ido Aharoni on our second AFKMC Zoom event on the cusp of July 4th weekend. As the longest serving New York Consul General, he represented a strong U.S.-Israel relationship and is responsible for making it stronger. He is Israel's branding expert, and we'll hear a bit about that. He created a sea change in American and world understanding as Israel as a startup nation. And one of the things which Steve Friedman and the leadership of AFKMC is working about, and Ido, this is something to put on your schedule, not for this July, but next July, we'll be doing the 45th anniversary of the Heavy Rescue as a national program here in Philadelphia. So we can have further conversations on that. So let me do a quick introduction of the amazing things that Ambassador Ido Aharoni is and has done. He's the founder of the Grand Israel Program. Again, he's the longest serving Consul General in New York and the tri-state area from 2010 to 2016. And just as a side remark, oh, and Tal Brody's joining us. Thank you so much, Tal, for being again with us. We launched this program last month. When I was early in my years, 2004, 2005, with the Israeli Consul in Philadelphia, I had the honor of taking a trip to the New York consulate, and I met Ido when he was Deputy Consul General. And one thing which impressed me so much is the warmth and humanity and the teddy bear of the guy, because when I came there, he welcomed me with open arms, and then he wrapped those arms around me with such warmth and friendliness. So he's also New York University's international relations expert. He's global ambassador for Maccabi World Union. He's chairman of the Charney Forum for New Diplomacy, and he's founder of Emerson Rigby Ltd. So those are many things, plus much more on his list. But Ido, it's such an honor and pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm humbled by the description of a hero. I never thought of myself of any type of hero. But what I would like to do in the short time that I have, and someone needs to let me share the screen. because I prepared a few slides for you.
Oh, excellent.
So what I would like to do in the short time that I have, and Lou told me that I have about 25 minutes. So what I would like to do, with your permission, is to tell you a little bit about the story of what we call Brand Israel, how the whole thing came about. And like many great things, it needed really a trigger. And the trigger, sadly, was obviously the events of September the 11th. I was in New York. I arrived to New York a few months before September the 11th, 2001. And I served as Consul for Media and Public Affairs. I was in charge of Israel's largest media relations and informational services apparatus worldwide. We were 15 people strong at the time. Unfortunately, that department doesn't exist anymore, at least not in that configuration. And when 9/11 happened, we realized, the Consul General at the time, Alon Pinkans, and myself, that something of biblical proportions had happened that would ultimately change the positioning of the Middle East in the eyes of the Americans and in the eyes of the Western world, and more specifically, the positioning of Israel. And so the first thing that we did, is what we were told to do as diplomats, is that we convened all the people that we know in the greater New York area. This is early 2002. Most of them naturally were political strategists and experts. Some names that came to that meeting were legendary names, like Howard Rubenstein and David Garth, the late David Garth, and Ken Sunshine and Hank Shenkoff, and many people that their specialty was political campaigning came, and they all had brilliant ideas as to what Israel needs to do. By the way, most of them said, keep quiet. This is not your tragedy. This is not your conflict. You just need to shut up. Obviously, Israel's leaders found it very difficult to keep quiet, but that, of course, wasn't part of our responsibility. But around that time, and we felt that all of their solutions, although were brilliant, they were tactical. And the reason why they were tactical is because political strategists, by definition, they are trained to mobilize a certain group of people to vote for a certain candidate on a certain date. So by definition, as bright as they may be, they are tactical. They are not strategic. And we Israelis have this big problem because most of us served in the army, and in the army, when people talk about strategy, they usually refer to tactical solutions to big issues. We don't have real strategic thinking. And so when we tend to confuse tactics with strategy, and that's a big problem. But around that time, in early 2002, I received a phone call from my friend Amir Gissin. This is the guy here in the middle. And he told me about a meeting that took place between an advertising executive in New York, whose name was David Sable, and the deputy foreign minister at the time, Rabbi Melchior. And David Sable at the time was an executive with an advertising company called Wunderman. And what Amir Gissin told me is that I think you should meet with this guy, David Sable, because he's talking about something else. He's not talking about campaigning. He's not talking about PR. He's talking about the overall management of Israel as a brand. And that really sparked my curiosity. And I met with David Sable in early 2002. And he told me, he opened my eyes to the idea of looking at a place the same way you look at any other brand. A place can be a city, a region, a nation, a continent, a destination, any type of destination. And basically what I started realizing is that there is something fundamentally wrong in the way we do things. And to learn more about it, he introduced me to this guy, Ed Labar, who was the head of the BAV, the Brand Asset Valuator, which was and still is the world's largest database on brands. And the BAV basically detects and follows and analyzes the behavior of brands. And the purpose of this whole thing is to try and to predict the behavior of the consumer vis-a-vis the brand, but more importantly, to try and understand the stature and the strength of the brand. It's a very, very sophisticated, all-encompassing, today global study. And thanks to an introduction that David Sable made in 2002 to the CEO of Young & Rubicam, which is the parent company of the BAV, Israel, for the first time in its history, was included in the world's largest database of brands. And what we discovered, the first study was done in 2003, pro bono, by the way, by Ed Labar, who orchestrated the study. And what we discovered in that study is that, at least when it came to the American people, Israel is better known than liked. What does it mean? It means that most people had an idea that there is such a place called Israel, so they were able to make a distinction between Israel and, let's say, its regional competitors, the neighbors. They felt that they had all the information they needed about Israel. In other words, they were not curious about Israel, which is a very bad thing for any brand. They did not hold Israel in a very high esteem because Israel was associated in their minds with conflict, and they did not see how Israel was relevant to their lives. This was the starting point in 2003. Israel is better known than liked, which is a very bad place for any brand to be in. And we started learning more about what it means to be a brand. What is really a brand? And the most important thing to understand about a brand is a brand doesn't have to be equal to the product or to the place it represents. A brand can be bigger or smaller than the product. Let me explain. The brand is the total sum of associations, emotions, experiences, and connections that we attach to a certain product, object, concept, even a personality, and certainly a place. Right? We all saw the great Netflix series about Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is perhaps one of the strongest brands in sports history because he fulfilled the promise that he stood for. Now, there are places, when we talk about places, that enjoy what we call a brand surplus, meaning the brand is stronger than the place, like Brazil. Most places, like Israel, like Slovenia, like Kazakhstan, like Georgia, have a brand deficit. We suffer from a brand deficit, meaning the place is far more attractive than the associations and the emotions it evokes among consumers. Around that time, in late 2002, early 2003, I was approached by several people. Each was, differently connected to the world of branding, marketing, and research, and they all wanted to help. Many people that said that they wanted to help, ended up that they were trying to help themselves and their businesses. But those four people, who became the core of the Brand Israel group, were really not about themselves. They were about the state of Israel. They were about the Jewish people. They really wanted to volunteer their time and their talent. And so I was first approached by this guy. His name was Lee Dranikoff. At the time, he was working for McKinsey. And he volunteered to do a study among the leadership of the Jewish community, trying to understand what is really being done in order to improve Israel's image and to strengthen the brand. The second person I met was this lady, Fern Oppenheim, who was an executive with Y&R at one time, but she was a brand expert. Then I met Dr. Boaz Murad, who was a psychologist who started a wonderful research company called Insight Strategies. He was a student of Daniel Kahneman, which is very relevant to the work that was done. And then I also met at around the same time Ellen Merlo, who was the head of the Weizmann, the American Friends of the Weizmann Institute, but also a strategic communications expert who worked with Philip Morris and understood a thing or two about managing crisis. And they formed a group called the Brand Israel Group. They took the original research of Ed Labar and they took it up to the next level, trying to understand what is it that Israel is doing wrong? Why is it that Israel is better known than liked? And what they discovered is, and you have to understand that in every brand research, in every marketing research, the goal is to be able to predict people's behavior. And what we discovered through their studies is that Daniel Kahneman was actually right. Daniel Kahneman, Princeton Hebrew U professor who won the Nobel Prize in economics, proved that people can live perfectly fine with a disconnect between the rational and the emotional, meaning rationally I can support you, agree with you, and emotionally I can dislike you, and vice versa. What we discovered is that the reason for Israel's underperformance had a lot to do with the fact that Israel was looking for political support. And Israel neglected the need to build and cultivate and nurture the emotional tie to what Israel represents. I can give you many examples. What the best example is the fact that most American Jews, although overwhelmingly support Israel politically, never been to Israel. It was very difficult to get them to invest money in Israel. Sherwin will tell you that. It was very difficult to have them develop a healthy, normal relationships with Israel. And of course, objectively, Israel did face major, major problems. But what we said was that given the geopolitical hardships, given the conflict, still, Israel can do much better. Israel's underperformance stemmed from the fact that we insisted that there is a conflict and that we need to convince the world that in that conflict we are right and our adversaries are wrong. The results, the repercussions of this almost obsession to win the debate, the imaginary debate on the conflict, resulted in major systemic underperformance. I'll give you a couple of examples, and I think Sherwin is better qualified to discuss the issue of direct foreign investment. Israel is a country that gave the world some of the most incredible technological breakthroughs, yet we are not even beginning to scratch the potential of the foreign money that could come in. Realistically, and I'm not fantasizing, Israel should be able to attract hundreds of billions of dollars every year worth of foreign direct investment. Study abroad. In the United States, you have 5,500 universities. You have 22 million students. You have 750,000 students that are studying abroad pre-COVID-19. We estimate conservatively that 75,000 of them are Jewish. How many of those Jews come to study in Israel, a country that has some of the best universities in the world, a country that is offering an abundance of courses in English? Less than 3,000. So this is a severe underperformance because of the fact that Israel became defined by its geopolitical hardships and not by its assets and qualities and contributions. Tourism. Israel was chronically underperforming in tourism. When we started with the Brand Israel program, less than 1 million tourists a year. Before COVID-19, 2020 was supposed to be a record year with over 5 million tourists. But realistically speaking, this is not me saying. Ernst & Young did a study years ago determining that realistically Israel could attract between 15 to 20 million tourists a year. This is something that is doable and feasible. And lastly, goodwill. When your brand is strong, it serves as a goodwill generator. When your brand is weak, you're lacking goodwill. Goodwill in foreign policy will take you a long way. Goodwill allows you maneuverability. Lou asked me before we convened about the Israeli plan to do the annexation. Exactly that. That's a perfect example. When your brand is strong, you have a lot of goodwill in the world, in the international community, that allows you to maneuver and make decisions, such the decision that the Israeli government would like to do. And frankly, I don't think it's going to happen because of domestic political reasons. It has nothing to do with the international community. In 2004, after we had the first and the second study, the implementation really started thanks to this lady. She doesn't even know her place in the history of the Brand Israel program. Her name is Elizabeth Kubani, and she worked at the time for an architectural firm called SOM that partnered with Moshe Safdie, the famous Israeli architect, to design the new Israeli airport, the Ben Gurion Airport, as well as other projects in Israel. And she approached me and she said, look, we're willing to sponsor a group of 12 writers on architecture to go to Israel to cover the architectural gems of Israel. And then it dawned on me, and I had the foreign ministry co-sponsor the trip, which she organized, and the amount of publicity that trip generated, good publicity, relevant publicity, was mind-boggling. It was just beyond imagination. And we realized then that the way to go is called micro-marketing. What does it mean, micro-marketing? The idea of blanket advertising or blanket advocacy doesn't work. People are interested in specific things, and we need to make sure that Israel is relevant to them. In this case, we discovered that Israel is very relevant to people that follow architecture. We then discovered that Israel is very relevant to people that are wine connoisseurs. And then we discovered that foodies, people that love food, you have in Philadelphia one of the best Israeli restaurants in the whole world, Zahav. People that love food, they will travel to eat. We discovered that those, and we have here on the call Tal Brody, we discovered that people love sports. And when they love sports, they set aside all the other things and they want to hear about what Israel has to offer in the era of sports. And again, Tal is my dear friend, and Tal is an icon, not only in Israel. He's an icon in America. He's an icon in collegiate basketball. He's an icon in the state of New Jersey. He's an icon in the Jewish community. And so we need to be able to celebrate those assets. And I'm very, very happy that Tal is part and parcel of this effort. However, there was some opposition to the idea of looking at Israel as a brand. The opposition conveniently decided that brand Israel is about ignoring the conflict, which we never said was the goal. On the contrary, we said the conflict is part of who we are. It's just that the brand cannot grow based on this futile exercise trying to convince the world that we are right and the others are wrong. Imagine what would have happened to the city of Chicago if the mayor of Chicago would convene every day a press conference bragging about how she's fighting crime every day. And this would be not only nationally televised, this would be internationally televised every day for 40 years. What would have happened to the city of Chicago? It would have been completely and absolutely defined by crime. But we know Chicago. Chicago is way more than crime. Chicago has a lot to offer, has cultural gems. Chicago is one of the most important cities in the world. So what Israel did to itself, by the way, voluntarily, we narrowed the discussion about Israel to geopolitics, thus defining Israel only through and by its problems, hardships, weaknesses, and deficiencies. And no brand in the world can grow and succeed by constantly talking about its problems. That was the big lesson that we learned from David Sable, the Brand Israel Group, all the way to the other people that later on helped us with the research. The opposition came from three places, one external and two internal places. The external was obvious. The delegitimizers, the people that say that Israel has no right to exist. We call them today BDS. You should know BDS is a term that was invented in Israel by Israeli policy group. And they conceptualized the term. Don't believe Omar Barghouti that he invented BDS. It was invented right here in Israel by Israelis themselves. The delegitimizers, people that don't believe that Israel has right to exist, they obviously rejected it. They said brand Israel is just camouflage. It's just an attempt to whitewash the crimes of Israel. Israel is the worst human rights offender in the whole world. With them, we have no discussion because there's nothing we can do to satisfy them. There's nothing we can say that they will reason with them. So we decided to set them aside. The second opposition, the second pushback that we received was from Israeli advocacy groups. The groups that believe that their job is to help the state of Israel better explain itself to the American people. There were several groups. One of them that was very vocal in its opposition to brand Israel doesn't exist anymore. It was based in Washington, D.C., and they basically launched a head-on campaign against brand Israel. And it was very vicious because it was, they were supposed to be part of the team, but they actually worked against us. Very, very, I should say, it was very vicious, unpleasant. And ultimately, the fact that they no longer exist, I think, speaks for itself. And then lastly, a pushback came from the foreign ministry, and especially the veteran diplomats. The younger diplomats connected with the idea of Israel as a brand. The older diplomats felt that this is taking them out of their comfort zone. They were trained to be the Middle Eastern analysts. They were trained to use historical and legal facts. They were trained to argue endlessly about who's right and who's wrong, and they just didn't understand the disruption that technology brought about to diplomacy, and that we needed as diplomats to reinvent ourselves and function function and think like chief marketing officers of our nation and not just like litigators. So that was it. In terms of what we promoted, and I have to say that I'm forever grateful for the opportunity given to me to come back to New York, because I left New York in 2005, Lou, after you met me, and I went to Israel, became the head of the brand management group, brand management team. I started the Brand Israel program officially, and we focused on 6 areas, highlighting Israel's creative spirit. That's the brand. We focused on Israel's technology and science, and your hospital definitely part of it. Israel's contribution to solving environmental problems and dealing with the climate change challenge. Celebration of Israel's eclectic nature, the diversity, the people, the heritage, the religion, the languages, the smells, and so on. Israel is a powerhouse when it comes to lifestyle and leisure, from product design all the way to fashion and food, art and culture, and finally, the international aid programs. These are the 6 areas of Israel's relative advantage, and relative advantage is a key term in economy. It's a key term in positioning and marketing. Competitive edge. These are Israel assets that we wanted to celebrate, and we started celebrating them very, very systematically by bringing international influencers to see and experience Israel for themselves. And of course, the presence and the existence of programs, game-changing programs like Birthright, like Masa, like Lapid, the Jewish Agency Program, like the Jewish National Fund, like what you're doing with Kaplan. Terrific stuff. This all helping us telling the real story. But the real change, and I know I'm getting a lot of credit from you about doing all of this, you know, I really don't deserve the credit. The real credit goes to this guy. No one did more to help Israel, the brand, than Steve Jobs. And he did it unknowingly. And how did he do it? In 2007, when the first smartphone was introduced, it was a game changer, because for the first time in the history of mankind, people were able to design their own informational feed. Before that, when you picked up a copy of your newspaper, someone was making a decision for you what's important. That someone was the gatekeeper. That someone was the mediator. And Israel, because it was defined by its geopolitical hardships, was mediated to you, the people in the United States and the rest of the world, by a handful of people, maybe 500-600 people, that they constantly spoke about Israel. They commented on Israel on television. There were the pundits, the political leaders. There were the columnists. There were the Tom Friedmans of the world. There were the Dennis Rosses of the world. And they spoke about one thing and one thing only: Israel's problems. And all of a sudden, Steve Jobs is allowing the Israelis themselves, not their leadership, not the diplomats, the Israelis themselves, to communicate their nation, their experiences, their lives, their families in an uncensored, authentic, unmediated way. And they did it through their self-designed feeds. And that was the game changer. And since 2007, 2008, 2009, we started seeing the needle moving in almost every aspect, with the exception of study abroad, which is still a big problem for us. But in tourism, we started to see growth. In foreign direct investment, we started to see a steady growth. And in the amount of goodwill, look what's happening now. Israel is having an unprecedented level of intimacy with China, with India, with Russia, with the United States, with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, with Brazil, with Nigeria, with Germany, and I can go on and on and on. We've never had it better geopolitically in terms of foreign policy like we're having it today. The book Startup Nation came about 6, 7 years after we started with our effort. And in many ways, it was a big boost, but also created a slight distortion, which is important to point. Startup Nation is a wonderful tagline. It's not a strategy. The book, when the book came out, I remember I had breakfast with Dan Sinor, and I told him I'm going to purchase from the budget of the foreign ministry 15,000 copies, because that's how important we think this book is. And we helped it spreading the word. We sent the books all over the world to influencers. Every member of Congress received it, every governor, every lieutenant governor, and so on and so forth. Israeli creativity goes way beyond startups. That's the most important thing to understand. Israel is way more than startup nation. Israeli creativity is manifested in every aspect of our lives. In the way we fight terrorism, we have to be creative. In the way we cook, in the way we dance, in the way we make films. Today, Israel is the third largest provider of content in Hollywood, which is unbelievable if you think about it. Israel is sending the third largest contingent to NASDAQ. Again, inconceivable for a nation of only 9.2 million people. So Startup Nation was a great boost, but also created a distortion, as if Israeli creativity begins and ends with high tech. Not true. High tech is important, is very important, but Israel has more to offer than Startup Nation. A word about the future. Israel is expected to be, by the year 2048, between 15 to 16 million people. And by 2065, we're expected to be 20 million people. It's an unprecedented population growth. I believe that Israel is only at the very beginning of the takeoff as a brand, because Israeli creativity, Israel's creative spirit, is a boundless resource. And today, I think there's a wide consensus all over the world that the most important thing is the ability to nurture creativity, the ability to allow creativity and creative minds to express themselves. That's the name of the game. Thank God we have an abundance of creative minds in our country, and I believe that the future belongs to them. Thank you very much.
Ido, thank you so much. And I have to tell you that we've done a disservice to you. We should have planned for the whole hour with you, but we wanted to get a few different stories out. And for those people who've requested it, firstly, this is being recorded, and we can send out the recording to everyone, so they'll have this. A few people came in a little bit later. And number two, Ido, if it'd be possible, if you could send me the slides, I can share that with people as well. That'd be greatly appreciated. So among the other amazing things you do is you have these tremendous friends all over Israel, the US, all over the world. And one you pointed us to is Sherwin Pomerantz, who actually I knew of, but I don't think I had a chance to meet him when I was at the consulate because I didn't do economics. But he's been the point person for states in the US and Canada in economic development in Israel, economic relations. And Sherwin, I apologize for this, but I know that you prepared a lot. If we can kind of condense a little bit, and then we'll be here for 60 minutes. Anyone who wants to stay longer for a little bit more Q&A are welcome to do that. But thank you very much. So Sherwin, 29 years, you've been operating regional overseas trade and investment offices on behalf of US states and Canadian provinces. You're formerly national president of the Association of Americans and Canadians in Israel. And I remember Americans and Canadians in Israel when I was a student at Hebrew University, because it provides great support to the students that Ido was talking about who are there. You're founding director and now chairperson of American State Office Association. And also important, again, from my years in Jerusalem, you're chairperson, board of directors of Jerusalem's Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies. I know education is extremely important to you. You were published last week in E-Jewish Philanthropy on that issue. And you're also involved as president of your congregation, Ohel Nahama in Jerusalem. So Sherwin, with that introduction, it's yours.
Lou, thank you very much. And Ido, thank you as well for making this introduction. I'm always happy to hear Ido's presentations because he not only has a wide breadth of interest and experience, but he's actually been a blessing to the state of Israel. He's done some seminal work on our behalf, and Israel has been fortunate to have him representing its interests both in New York and back in Yerushalayim as well. and now in the private sector. So it's really an honor to be on the same program with him. I sort of want to pick up from where one of the directions that he went into. We also, our organization, saw ourselves for many years as chief marketing officers, if you will, for the state of Israel. And we started out in 1991 actually working with Israel's Ministry of Industry and Trade. It was named a little bit different at the time. And Israel was not a great recipient of foreign direct investment at that time. Ido alluded to that in his presentation. And the state of Israel then put what they thought was a lot of money. They put $1 million into an advertising budget in the United States with a firm called Hill & Knowlton. Hill & Knowlton needed somebody to feed them information, and we were doing some volunteer work for the ministry, and somebody at the ministry said to us, why don't you go into business and you can be the feed into Hill & Knowlton, which we did. One of the things we learned from the experience in working with them was actually the paucity of business activity, particularly between the United States and Israel. At that time, Israel's political situation was considerably more limited than it is today. It didn't have a lot of options in a lot of countries, but the relationship with the United States was very strong, but the business relationship wasn't that strong. In 1985, when Israel signed the first free trade agreement, or America signed the first free trade agreement with any country in the world, and it was with Israel, bilateral trade in 1985 was just under $5 billion. In 2019, bilateral trade was $34 billion. So almost a tenfold increase in those years. And it was clear to us at that time that there was a lot more potential. We were working on working with companies that had a potential interest in investing in Israel through the ministry. But it hit us that the whole business relationship between the United States and Israel had significant potential that wasn't being examined. One of the things we found out, Israel is a great story, but the great story is made up of a lot of little stories. And the little stories are really what makes the place tick. And the little stories are what individual people can accomplish in this incredible country that we live in. So we went down the route of saying, yes, we need the business. How does America do business? And one of the things we found out was that many, many American states have offices overseas to promote trade and investment. Pennsylvania, where Lou, you're sitting, and that's how we met at one time, is one of them. Pennsylvania traditionally has had the largest overseas system of any state in the union. It was one of our early clients. And we started actually going after those kinds of people to convince them to open up in Israel. We were very fortunate in the beginning to pick up the state of California as a first client. We liked that business. And then basically I ended up spending a number of years traveling from state capital to state capital. In those days, this was before 2001. It was before all of the security issues were in place. You could be in New York and make an appointment in Georgia and arrange it so you had a 2-hour stop in Raleigh, and you could meet somebody at the airport in Raleigh and go on, and nobody had to deal with all the security issues that we deal with today. And that's basically what I did. I went around state by state for the better part of 3 years, talking to companies and to states and telling them this was a new era. This was, as you recall, around the time of the Oslo Accords. We were promoting the concept that a U.S. state could locate an office in Israel and operate regionally from that office in the entire Middle East. It wasn't, to be sure, the easiest sell in the world, but it was a reasonable sell because A, states for the most part were not doing business in the Middle East. B, the other countries in the Middle East were not particularly attractive. C, Israel had a well enough developed technical platform in terms of communications and related activities so that it was attractive to states, and you could make them believe that you could physically run a regional trade office for Pennsylvania or Illinois or any other state, headquarter it in Jerusalem, and operate throughout the Middle East. At the time we started that promotion, it was Massachusetts and California were the only two states that were here. That was in 1991. By the time we were finished with the marketing program, got to its maximum, which was the year 2000, there were 20 U.S. states with offices in Israel. Israel had more U.S. state offices than any other single country in the world. And Ido was talking about the amazing thing that a country of 9.2 million people can do. That's an amazing statistic when you look at it, because we are a small place at the eastern end of the Mediterranean. We definitely punch way beyond our weight. The reputation in those days, brand Israel, was not as strong as it is today, and all credit to Ido and his group for making that change. But the fact is that we were still attractive. People just didn't know about us. They didn't know other things other than what they saw as Ido referred to as a political situation. And so we spent a fair amount of time doing that. And the states that came were ones you know, we had California and Illinois and Indiana and Wisconsin, Georgia, Missouri, Delaware, Pennsylvania, of course, New Mexico, Oklahoma, in addition to what other people had, Massachusetts and New York and Maryland. Every state you could think of any size, and even some that weren't so big, were there. Frankly, our organization takes credit for bringing them all here, even though we didn't get to represent every one of them. We knew that up front. But the fact is, we were the only ones out there actively recruiting and meeting with people and telling them, why they should be locating in Israel and what the ultimate benefit is. It turned out that today we remain the only company that represents states regionally. All of the other states that are here are Israel offices only for a whole series of reasons, but we actually travel the entire Middle East and cover everything from Morocco out as far east as Pakistan. And so what has changed? I indicated to you earlier that bilateral trade had multiplied by a factor of 10 since 1985. That's an amazing figure. In the year between 1990 and 2019, there was a 522% increase in bilateral trade between the two countries. Ido spoke about foreign investment into Israel, which is very important, but there's also a tremendous amount of foreign investment into the United States from Israel. And in 2018, which was the last year we had figures for, $38 billion of foreign direct investment went into the United States, which represented almost 26,000 jobs on the ground in the U.S. So that's another story that certainly the BDS people don't talk about, and basically neutralizes their argument that everything, that Israel is on the take. There's plenty of business coming the other direction, and as I said, 26,000 jobs is nothing to sneeze at. Today, we have 12 state offices in Israel. Arizona was the newest one to open up at the end of last year, in addition to which we have a fair number of regional offices. Fairfax County has one, Virginia has one of their 5 overseas offices in Israel. Cincinnati, Dayton, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, American Israel Chambers in Northern California and Atlanta all have representatives here. And what we did some years ago and still do is, you referred to this in the introduction, is we formed an association of state offices so that we can work together on those areas where we have a common interest. And we do that. We work together at trade shows and investment promotion activities and what have you. Finally, we've also expanded, we have expanded a bit beyond that, and now have our own network in 21 countries around the world of companies that do similar work as we do. The bottom line is that, again, Israel, as I said, Israel is a big story made up of a lot of small stories. Ours is one of those small stories. But in crafting that small story, we have been responsible and take credit for the development of a tremendous amount of cross-border activity between Israel and the United States, although there are now plenty of additional agencies as well that are involved in that. So we're happy to be able to look at that historically and proud of the accomplishments. And again, to go back to how Ido started, Brand Israel has grown, and Brand Israel continues to grow. And it's because of us and all of you and people like yourself and the Kaufman Hospital and all others who add to that capability. And we're proud to be here with you today and happy to take questions.
Sherwin, thank you so much. And it just is amazing. Both you and Ido are true heroes of Israel. You are also masters networkers. And I'm so energized by the people who are on this call with us. And I encourage you, be in touch and we'll network and we'll make more connections as we go forward. So in our Zoom series, Israel Heroes, we want to have a piece of it with some stories from American Friends of Kaplan Medical Center regarding our Kaplan Medical Center in Rehovot. So with that, we've invited two people to give short stories of their connection to Israel. Amazing, amazing people, very good friends. Jerome Baxley, who's actually on our national board. He's on our executive board for American Friends of Kaplan Medical Center. And he's also supporting this program. He made a significant donation just recently, just a week ago. And thankfully, the doors are still open. Thank you, Jerome. As I mentioned, he's one of the best Jewish people in our leadership, and he happens to be a Christian evangelical. So Jerome just was in Israel in March for his 7th Hessed mission. Because of coronavirus, it did not happen, but I had the honor of connecting him with the person in Israel, I believe, with one of the biggest hearts, Tal Brody, who met with Jerome. And with that, Jerome, take it away for a few short stories.
Okay, Lou, if you wouldn't spend so much time on accolades, we'd have more time to talk. But no, Friends of Israel is an organization started in 1938 by a group of Christian businessmen with the sole purpose of getting Jewish people back to their homeland. Of course, this was 10 years before the nation of Israel was a nation. And I had been to Israel about 6 or 7 times on just tours. And I had decided I was tired of coming to Israel tour and I wanted to come do something. Now, Friends of Israel puts out a great magazine called Israel My Glory. If you'd send me if anybody wants to get that magazine, I'll be glad to get you a prescription to it. You just send me your name and address and I'll do that. But I saw in there where they had started this program called Hessed, Loving Kindness. It was going to take a group of older people to Israel to do work in Kaplan Medical Center. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to go over and work and be involved with the Jewish people. So in 2012, we went over for our 2-week tour. The people really wasn't expecting us to do anything. I don't think they didn't know what we were supposed to do. They was afraid to give us too much work. And finally they decided, okay, these guys will do anything. So they started giving us all the dirtiest jobs you can imagine. I mean, we cleaned some of the filthiest bathrooms. It would make a buzzard puke. But we did it and smiled about it. And they take a lot of breaks over there. And we wound up in the break room a lot. I was sitting in the break room one day with this lady. She wasn't a nurse, but she was I'm not sure what she did, but I know she wasn't a medical person. But anyway, she was. We were talking, and she just come out and asked me. She said, "How much do they pay you for working like you do?" And I had to kind of laugh, and I said, "Well, ma'am," I said, "actually, we pay $3,800 a piece to come over here and work for free." And she said, "Why? Why do you do that?" I said, "Because we love you." And she said, no, nobody loves the Jews. Everybody hates the Jews. I said, well, you're partially right. I said, a lot of people do. I said, but there are people that love the Jewish people. I said, and we're over here to show you, we support you and we stand behind you. And she just put her hands up on her chest like that, and she said, you warm my heart. And it's hard to tell people we don't get paid for doing that. Look, I don't think Bill Gates has got enough money to buy something like that. I mean, that was just great. The last day we were over there in 2012, we'd come out of the lunchroom, and we'd our whole Hessed team was sitting out on the grass, soaking up some sunshine. And these 3 doctors come walking out of the lunchroom, walking down the sidewalk, and they stopped. One of them come over and got right in front of us. And he pointed his finger at us. And I'm thinking, oh, we fixing to get our butt chewed out about something. But he pointed at us. He said, you must come back. You must come back and teach us to love like you love. And I knew right then that was mission accomplished. We went over there to show God's love to the Israeli people. We wanted to be the face of Yeshua to the people of Israel. and it worked. They saw it. They noticed it. One thing, real quickly, I wanted to say, one thing I think I've accomplished in Israel at Kaplan Medical Center, the people over there, I was surprised that they smoke like chimneys. I mean, everybody smoke. They smoke everywhere, in the offices, in the hospital, in the hallways. I couldn't believe it. And when they get through smoking, they throw the cigarette butts down on the ground. And I'm a pet peeve about that. I hate trash on the ground. And so like I say that we didn't have a whole lot to do when we got through with doing something. Instead of asking them for more, and they didn't have anything, I just started picking up cigarette butts. And I told my whole team, I said, if you don't have anything to do, get a trash bag, go pick up cigarette butts, because that's a never-ending job. So from 2012 until 2019, the last year when I was over there working, we would just pick up trash when we didn't have anything else to do. And it was something we did every year. Well, in 2019, I told the new people that was on the trip, if you don't have anything to do, just get a garbage bag and start picking up cigarette butts. There's always something to do. Well, we got there and we started walking around. The ladies got to ask me, where's all the cigarette butts? And I got to noticing they wasn't any. The grounds were clean. Everywhere we looked, there was no cigarette butts on the ground. And I said to myself, I said, wow, I have accomplished something in Israel. I got them to quit throwing cigarette butts on the ground and respect the place they live, respect the land. And so I was, I know what the Bible says about being proud, but I was proud of myself for accomplishing that right there, if nothing else, at Kaplan. Well,
Jerome, we're so proud of you for your leadership, for your love for Israel. A quick shout out to Shmuley Bowman. And the thing is that many of this on this call, it's not just one cause. It's not just American Friends. It's not just Kaplan Medical Center. It's many causes. So I know Shmuley, who puts those shelters, bomb shelters on all over Israel. Thank you for being part of this. Good friend of ours. And Jerome, your leadership is so appreciated. I'm going to let Adeline tell the story, which of her connection. Adeline Smidt is a young adult from South Dakota. She's 20 years old for next week or two. She was on the Friends of Israel Origins Youth Mission in 2018. She loves Israel. She loves the Hebrew language. And she's worked closely with us, with the AFKMC office, in some of the programs we do with synagogue Sunday school students, talking with them about tzedakah, because our Christian young people many times demonstrate tremendous tzedakah that our Jewish young people can learn from. One other thing about Adeline, she was on a conference call last week, joining young Jewish professionals from around the country as we develop leadership programs for young adults in the Jewish community. And some of our best leaders happen to be non-Jews. Anyway, Adeline, to you.
Thank you, Lou. I'm super excited to be here, and it's great to be able to hear other stories about Israel, because I always love hearing more about Israel in any shape and form. But I went to Israel for the first time in 2018 as part of Origins, which is basically the young adult version of the Hessed mission that Jerome has gone on. And we basically do a lot of the same things. I know our team did pretty much everything from, I was on the maintenance crew, so I painted a lot of pipes, but housekeeping, landscaping, you name it, we did it. And we had a lot of fun. In the end, I think it turned out to be not so much about the work, although we did work, and I think everyone at the hospital did appreciate that. But it was so much fun to get to know the Israelis that we were working with, and also kind of to see how life goes on over in Israel. Because like Ido talked about, you hear a lot of stories, and even though I have always been political support of Israel, it takes, at least for me, once you go there, once you're with people, you really understand more of the emotional connection to Israel as well. But one of the things, so I painted a lot of pipes. We worked for the maintenance crew, and miles and miles of pipes, it seemed. But they didn't want to overwork us. And so we were always a little bit embarrassed because they would take us down to lunch early and we'd be like the first ones there, and we're sitting there in line for lunch and we're like, we feel so bad they brought us down here early. So we'd wait for the rest of our team, and then we'd wait for some of the Kaplan staff to go ahead into the lunch line, and then we'd kind of sneak in. But a lot of times after lunch, we would go to the office to report to our boss, and we're like, okay, what's next? What do you need us to do? And he would be like, oh, you know, sit, eat, drink. They'd make us coffee. We would talk, see pictures, you know, just have a good time. And I think that was equally as important as the work we did. And we loved it. We loved it. And it gave us kind of a personal connection to everything you just hear about in the news.
So Adeline, there's one story to finish us off about you were so engaged by your trip to Israel with Origins that you went back to study. And then something happened. It was the time of this coronavirus. So tell us what happened.
Yes. So last December, I went back to Israel to stay with some friends that I had made during my Origins tour. And I was there from December to March. And at the beginning of March, I took a week off, went to Germany. And I was planning on coming back to Israel for a little while longer. So all I took was my carry-on bag. And then I flew back into Israel. It was, I think, 2 days before the global pandemic was declared or something crazy like that. And for several different reasons, things didn't work out and I did not get back in. But unfortunately, I had a suitcase worth of clothes and just stuff back in my room. And long story short, that was around the time the Hessed mission was in Israel. And Jerome ended up being the lucky one to bring all of my clothes back from Israel when he returned from his short-lived Hessed mission this last year. So I got my clothes back, and that is how I met Jerome. And it was a very crazy story. It was a lot of fun. I know he had some interesting experiences, but it all worked out.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in Hebrew, we have a saying, Eza Olam Katan, you two Christian evangelical lovers of Israel met and are both together here today. I'm very wary of people's time, so I want to say a big thank you to our heroes of Israel, Ido Aharoni, Sherwin Pomerantz, Jerome Baxley, and Adeline Smidt. I'm here. I can stay another 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I do want to say this has been phenomenal. Again, it's a recording that we'll share with people who've been on here. And Ido, again, the slides would be very, very helpful. Number of requests for that. I guess the best way to do this, Scott, if you can help me, and a special thanks to our staff for American Friends of Kaplan Medical Center. Scott Brenner is our web whiz. Jill Workman is our administrative coordinator. Lori does our communications, helps with communications. Jocelyn's our graphic designer. Special thanks to Jocelyn. And Scott, if I can ask you to help, if people either raise their hands or if Scott can take a look at the chat, we'll pull in people for questions. So who wants to start? Or fun stories. If you know our speakers, share a fun story, a connection. Well, I know this has been of tremendous value to many of our participants here. One of our board members from California, Joel Siegel, who's the heads up the South California Israel Chamber of Commerce. I know you gained a lot from this connection. Again, part of what we want to do is network.
He's asking for people. He's asking for people. People who are the.
Go ahead, Ruby. I'm sorry. Did you have a comment or question, Ruby?
Oh, no, let me just tell you, I didn't. That was an error, but however, it was really not an error. It was a fascinating time. It was a marvelous webinar, marvelous. Probably one of the best I've seen. And the other thing is, I've got to tell you, Sherwin is a personal and a best friend of ours for, I don't know, 50 years. And you know what? Exactly like you spoke about him and exactly like he spoke, that's our Sherwin. Thank you so much for honoring him and honoring everybody else who did such a beautiful job. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, I want to tell people this coming weekend, July 4th weekend, is very important of our American story. Next July 4th, we'll be talking about the American Israel narrative, because on America's 200th anniversary was the miracle of Entebbe. We do a program, actually, I've been doing a program every 5 years for the last 30 years.
Nice.
4 years ago, we did the first national commemoration for Entebbe. And Ido, if we can consult with you on that, because I think it's going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal program. And we're putting our dibs in now for next July. Other special people, Andy Borens, the amazing guy behind AEP. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I want you on one of the future Heroes of Israel Zoom webinars, because you have stories to tell about how you've energized the campus community for Israel. And I want to share, I want you to share that story with these people at a later month. Any
Thanks
other
so
special friends who want to say a connection?
Yeah, nice.
Very nice, very nice. Okay. Any thoughts? Ido, as long as we have you, and with your years of diplomacy, something special is happening in Israel, and maybe give us 2 minutes of an understanding of what may or may not happen on July 1st with the thoughts of annexation.
Yeah, so I believe it was Henry Kissinger who said that Israel has no foreign policy, only domestic policy. And I think this is just one example. Something that started as a campaign slogan turned into a big foreign policy issue. The good news is that the world doesn't really care. COVID-19 dominates the news cycle. The Palestinians did themselves in. When you look at their intransigence and their rejectionism over the last 20 years, no wonder that even in the Arab world, no one is really listening to what they have to say. I remember when I joined the Foreign Service many, many years ago, the idea of the U.S. moving the embassy to Jerusalem was inconceivable for the very simple reason that everybody was a given that the entire Middle East will go up in flames if the United States will even dare to think about that. But look what happened. The United States decided to move the embassy, and practically, there was some rioting going on along the Gaza border, but when you look at the big picture, nothing really happened. And the reason is because the Palestinians exhausted all the goodwill. If we go back to the language of brand, they don't have a strong brand, which means they don't have any goodwill, not even in the Arab world. So right now they're being left to their own devices, and it's up to Israel to decide what to do. And there is a big political debate. If you ask me, my prediction, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because it's not necessary. There is no value in it. It's not going to help us in any way, shape, or form. It's only going to create a more difficult situation internationally, which I don't think we want. But what started as a campaign slogan actually now is on the verge of becoming real policy. And I don't know if Sherwin has his own opinion on this issue.
No, I don't have an opinion on whether or not we should do it. I have an opinion on one aspect of if we do it. I think that if we do it, if we're going to remain a democratic state, that anybody who's within Israel has to have the same rights that everybody else has in Israel. That's a personal issue for me. But I did want to add something. There are so many things that the average person doesn't know that's going on behind the scenes. If you go into the Palestinian areas and forget for a moment the politics, 5 years ago we did a project under USAID auspices to bring Palestinian software developers to America to see whether there were people in the United States who wanted to outsource their software development abroad at costs of 30-35% of what it costs to do it in the United States. We did that under a contract with the Palestinian Information Technology Association. We went there, we met with software companies. When you walk into those places, if you didn't know where you were, you think you were in Silicon Valley, the same 7-8-story buildings with young people in T-shirts and laptops slung around their shoulders. We brought 8 companies to 3 places, New York, Philly, and Morristown in New Jersey. And a few of them were quite successful in doing that. So there is this other side that doesn't get talked about very much for reasons on both sides. You know, they don't want to see too much publicity about, quote, normalization. And we're doing a lot of work. A lot of Israeli companies are heavily involved with Palestinian companies. We have Israeli venture capital funds that have special funds for investment into Palestinian companies as well. So there's a lot of that that doesn't make the press, but it's an untold story that's really an important story because it shows a different aspect of what you normally see in the papers. So
That's
Lou,
amazing.
I have to leave you at this point because I have another call.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Ido,
so
again,
much
Ido,
for
thank
hosting.
you.
Thank you very much, Ido.
Kol hakavod.
This has been tremendous. You've helped us, as I said from the beginning. We're in great distance, but there's an intimacy to our coming together. And let me do a last plug for what we're doing for American Friends of Kaplan Medical Center. We're trying to bring the message of the importance of this hospital in Israel, in the center of Israel, with 3 strategic values. If you leave understanding this about Kaplan Medical Center, makes that part of our mission worthwhile. Number 1, 1 million Israelis in the center of the country, between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. This is their lifeline, their medical lifeline. This is a strategic value to the country. A friend, David Badin, and will open my eyes to that. He said, Lou, it's amazing what you're doing because people don't know this strategic value of this hospital. Number 2, when Tal was on, we also had 2 people talking about the importance, their own personal stories. One was Niv and Sigal, or 2 words, Niv and Sigal Nehemia, who Niv fought off terrorists in the Super Sol 3 years ago. And that second value is strategic value, is that in times of terror and acts of war, this hospital is in the center with not just one of the best trauma centers in the country, but in the world, and Israel depends on that. And number 3 is that we had Officer Netta last time with the IDF Elite Unit 669, and guess what? The Tel Nof Air Force Base is in Rehovot, 3 miles away from Kaplan Medical Center. So those doctors have to be ready 24/7 to go on these international rescue missions. And that was confirmed by Officer Netta to me at IEC back in December a year ago, or half a year ago. Anyway, with that, thank you all. This is a tremendous opportunity of networking. Anytime you have any questions, I can help make connections with you. We can help make connections. You want to be helping us with our projects, please be in touch. And thank you all for this special opportunity. Special thank you to Jerome, our key leader, one of our major leaders in the country for American Friends of Kaplan, and to Adeline, who's a future leader within the Israel support community and for our Jewish community. We thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Lou. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Oh, and Steve, our national
Yes.
chair, where would we be? We thank you so much. Wonderful
For
program.
God's sake. Can I tell you what? With this group, I'm just dazzled, and thank you. And it was just great to hear from everybody. Take care. Thanks.
Take care. Okay, we will end now. Thank you so much.